Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brett Campbell Show. Today we are back with an all-time first. We're just breaking records like there's so many records here to be broken. So this record, in fact, is the first ever repeat guest in the shortest time possible. So that was a bit of a mouthful. We've had repeat guests here before, which I'm sure you're aware. Actually, that's incorrect. We have not had any repeat guests on the Brett Campbell Show, but because I've got multiple podcast shows, I like to bring people in and for example, the guest that I have today, he appeared on Cast 6 days ago. We recorded the episode. The podcast is with Fred Schebesta. Fred Schebesta is the co-founder of finder.com.au and also finder.com, company valued at $246 million. Fred has a personal wealth of over $193 million. And I brought him in on Cast and we talked about everything, how they built Finder, and where it came from, and how they've evolved as a business, which is what Cast is all about, right? Interviewing extremely successful people in business about their business. But halfway through the conversation, Fred and I, you'll quickly uncover that you probably know this about me already, but with Fred, he's a deep thinker. He takes time to think about things because he really wants to articulate a meaningful answer. And we started talking about a number of things in Cast, and I was like, "Oh, Fred, let's just pivot here because we're about to hijack the Cast episode." So I wanted to bring him back so we could talk about these things on this episode. So this is a very tangential podcast, this one. We go down a number of different topics of conversation. We talk about money, we talk about mindset, we talk about wealth, we talk about communication, we talk about values, personal values. So we talk about everything but the kitchen sink. I don't think we talked about actually, I did refer to how many glasses of bottles of water I think I might have drunk. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. But anyway, we talked about a lot of things, right? So this is a really good episode inside the mind of a successful, successful entrepreneur. Actually, we talk about that as well. We talk about the transition from business owner to entrepreneur, and should you be the person actually running your business, and a number of things. So I'm just going to stop right there, and we're going to do what we do best, and we're going to transition straight into the episode. Hope you enjoy this one as much as I have enjoyed bringing it to you. Let's get into the episode. Roll the intro music. The interview with Fred Schebesta. Fred, mate, this is actually, I have to say, you are the quickest turnaround of any guest that I've ever had on any podcast I've ever produced. And this is my 10th podcast show. Actually, this is the 9th podcast show. We started the 10th last week. But the turnaround time, I believe, is it's almost less than a week, isn't it? When did we last?
Tuesday.
So there we go. It hasn't even been a week. We're literally 6 days. And, most people will be going, well, why have you got Fred back within a 6-day turnaround? And mate, to be perfectly honest, we started the initial podcast, so Cast, really, where we're speaking about, your journey as the founder of Finder. And we started speaking about a few things, and I have this ability or inability at times to not stop. But in this case, wanting to really find out a lot more and deeper conversation about, you as a human being, which I think really that's where a lot of the value really comes from when you speak to another human being. You can share all the accolades and all the awesome success and, be like a hype front for something. But, when I started to speak to you, I had a lot of similarities and I could tell you're a deep thinker as a person. You don't just rush to an answer. You actually, I could see your brain sort of thinking through and trying to give, the best possible answer that you can give. So, mate, I'm glad we're able to do round 2. So this is going to be super exciting. I'm excited about this. So, mate, explain to me, have you always been a deep thinker? How do you think through things? What goes on in your brain, man?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of potentially been the bane of some of my ex-girlfriends' existence, that I will momentarily just go silent, and during a conversation or at an event or wherever, or at home, and I'm just sitting there and I just I'll go silent and not speak to anyone. And I didn't really notice that. I just thought that everyone did that. Everyone just paused and needed some time to think and some space to think. And then when it was pointed out to me quite repeatedly, I was like, oh, that must be a thing that I do. And, my current partner, she is incredible, and she totally puts up with some of the most probably annoying habits that I have. And one of them is, these blanks in time. And she just says, oh, he's just not available for service right now. She calls us.
You're connecting to the source, right? You're like, your head's doing a Google search and you're like, oh, what am I going to come out with here?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was always the opposite, right? Like when I grew up, I would speak before I thought, right? So that was my default as I was growing up. But when I uncovered that, the old, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should do twice as much listening, I was like, okay, there's something to that, which again led into, once I started to dive into marketing, actually was the precipice of it for me, was once I started uncovering marketing and psychology and communication, I realized that, the words we say are really important, right? There's an important, like you could say a word in a certain way, even with a different tonality, and it can just mean a complete different thing, right? Yeah. So I was having a conversation. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and I was like, don't you find it absolutely baffling that there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, right? There's only 26 letters in the alphabet. And we as a population have to use all of those 26 letters in some formation to create communication, right? Like there's not many letters. There's not a lot of area for this communication to sort of grow into, because this sort of come off the back end of, for me, thinking about how do you have conversation? Like our human brains are far too intelligent for our capacity right now. Like we're not even tapping into the ability that we have, in regards to the brain capacity. It's because we're using 26 letters.
Yeah, that's really, and I think in Slavic languages there is, I don't know if it's even more or less. I can't remember if it was more or less, but you're right. Yeah, and I think alphabets came from Persia, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a long, long time ago. And I always remember the fascinating concept of when they named zero. They just didn't have a word for when nothing existed. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting concept to name. I think 2 things. I just want to tie a few bits together there, and is one, I do think about the power of words, and you're right. I think marketing as well, that's probably where you start to go down that journey. And like, what does the word free mean to someone? Or what does the word better mean to someone? Or what does the word, for us, an important word is find. Find is an interesting word. And when you say the word internally inside the company, when you say the word, when a customer reads it, they have a different place where they're not inside the company, and so they don't have that background, which is fascinating in and of itself. And I just wanted to touch upon something you said before that really, you were talking about words and the power of them. And I've been thinking a lot, I think we talked about this last time, but a lot about stories. And what I think is interesting potentially that might build on your idea as well is, yes, you start from those letters, that nomenclature that expands into words, which then has attributes which have, I think, stories attached to each one. So when you think of a bird, you think of a picture and probably a story about a bird and the experience you had with them, and that's what you think a bird is. Some people think of a bird as a pet, so they love birds. Some people think the story of, they saw an eagle go and eat something off, and they're like, oh, they're killers, and so you're like scared of birds, or, you've had, and so I think when you take the sort of the rings of everyone's stories and find that common center in some way of what a bird is, that's what that word collectively means, and where you need to zone your nucleus of focus of when you say the word bird, it means only these small things collectively to the most number of people.
I spent 2 hours the other day on a podcast with someone, and we were talking about everything from racism to religion to the universe, and you name it, we probably touched on it. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, and especially with where the world is at right now, with what's going on and the hysteria that's circulating around the world. And it comes from what you just said there. It's the baseline. We're not operating off what the same meaning of something is, right? You say the word racism, right? And it's like what you think racism is might be different to 100,000 other people whose definition of racism equals X. So we're humans trying to live a life based off what we believe a meaning of a word is. The amount of times that, I couldn't even count. I would estimate literally without a shadow of a doubt, hundreds of times just this year, I've gone to the dictionary because I'm like, what does that word really mean? Right? Like, what's the actual definition of this word? Because I love language, and I love the art of communication, and I love being able to. I think the big thing for me is I've been on this quest for the last 3 years of really trying to expand my consciousness and expand my ability to be able to challenge my mind. You go to the gym and you do sets and reps, and when you get to that sort of, you got maybe 2 or 3 reps left in you, and most people would hang up the bar and you're like, no, I'm going to push through. That's what I've been trying to do with my mind, right?
That's
I've been trying to expand my level. So I'm using words that sometimes I'm like, fuck, what does that word even mean? I know I've heard it, and I'm like, where does that come from? I better go back and double check if I've used that word correctly, right? But the power of it it's unbelievable, because words have the ability to shift humanity, which, as you can see right now, that's exactly what's happening, all right? And I think it ties back into you go.
Oh, I feel your energy on that really strongly. I think people are questioning the meaning of things. That's probably the meta. I feel that. This is strange, but I actually had to look up the word entrepreneur the other day. Like, I didn't actually know what is an entrepreneur exactly.
I've looked it up several times just to recalibrate.
I'll read it out. I think it's interesting. I just looked it up again because I think it's important. But it says a person who sets up a business or businesses taking on financial risks in the hope of profit.
Pursuit of profit. Yep.
I just feel like that's a fascinating thing that I think a lot of, the perception of an entrepreneur and what they are doing and where their place is and what people expect from them and the risks they've taken on. And now people are going, to these entrepreneurs who have these businesses, and they're like, well, they're hoping for a profit, and anything extra that they do apart from that, I think is just, people should be so grateful for. It's that's just so amazing what some companies are doing. And I don't know, I just have this, there's that financial risk as well. I think that's become extraordinarily more visceral and apparent now that people are feeling this, and there's just so much hurt. I just don't know whether that's necessarily been bubbled to the top yet, or it's spoken about, but like I've just seen, I'm going around the city here in Sydney, and there are businesses that were there. We've been in this office for 10 years, and I walk past and they've gone. Like these shops that were there, and these businesses that I thought were, there's nothing there. They're empty commercial spaces.
It's a highlight for the entrepreneurial community, for the business community, I think, especially, this whole COVID situation. And I've talked about this so many different ways, and I want to try and come to it from a different way right now, in the whole, in alignment with me trying to expand my own thinking and thoughts around things. But I fundamentally believe that entrepreneurship over the last, let's say, birth of Instagram has become more of a fun thing to do or try. Right? It's like, I'm going to try and do this versus, do you really understand what you're embarking on? And you broke down the definition. And when you go to the definition, you can sort of build upon that and you can break it down even further, right? And the element of taking risk, right, in the reward for profit. So it's like, you do X, you get Y. That's the equation of entrepreneurship. Where we're living in such a world of entitlement, I feel, where people expect that they should have a job and they should get paid and they should be able to get benefits from the business and they should be able to have time off when they want time off. So there's this such a level of entitlement, I feel, in the world itself. And it's been highlighted now. And I hope in a way that people who are in a job are actually far more grateful for what these crazy entrepreneurs, the people who put their name out there, they put their money out there to risk it all, right? And you get people who are like slamming Elon Musk right now because his Tesla stock just went up and he's now earned another, $20 billion net worth type thing. And they're like, oh, he should give it all away. It's like, now, I believe that it would be nice if someone like him did start to do a lot more of that, and I'm sure he is, right? But who the hell am I to tell someone what to do with what they've done? If you look at his track record and the risks that he's taken, it's like people don't see that, right? Like, as far as I'm concerned, Jeff Bezos deserves to be the richest man on this planet. And if he wants to buy a small city, he should, because look at what he's actually providing. Right? My hope in humanity that, and I can only ever put myself sort of in those shoes until I'm in those shoes, because who fucking knows what happens when you got $100 billion, I mean, you've experienced a level of wealth that most people will never get to experience in their lifetime, and I'm sure you have potential, and I'd actually like to know, let's turn this into a question. I'm sure you've felt, a high level of responsibility in what you now need to do with the levels of wealth that you've been able to create. How's money changed you, or how's money or success helped shape you is probably a better question.
So I think in the beginning and over the particularly last 4 years, when finders got into a much more relatively strong, there's obviously stronger companies, but a relatively strong financial position.
It's valued at 246 million. Is that correct? Roughly, it's valued around this. Just to give perspective to people listening. So we're not talking about $20 million company, which is still great, but you've reached a level that complications obviously start to it's a different beast, let's call it.
Yeah, it still feels like this, like I feel relatively, I feel comfortable about it. I think, but Brett, what, going back to your mental gym analogy and building on that, I really challenged myself over the last, say, 5 years to go to the emotional gym, and it essentially called into questions my relationship with money. So as in me as an individual and money, and being very vulnerable here, I think I had a quite unhealthy relationship with money, where it wasn't aligned and it didn't feel comfortable. Actually, I'd normally feel more anxious and more stressed from it than even so wanting it, I'd feel anxious. Then getting it, I'd feel even more anxious. And I was like, okay, well, that's just that. What is going on there? It doesn't. That doesn't. Neither of those situations make any sense. Firstly, and secondly, I think I worked out, Brett, that my goal is not just, and some people have this, but isn't just not the sole purpose of what I'm doing. Otherwise, every time I got money, I would feel extreme joy, and that would overcome me. And that's all I would try and do, is just get money and not care about anything else.
Yep. Did you grow up with money, or did you grow up in, what was money like for you growing up?
I think in the beginning, my parents, we lived a very frugal lifestyle. They were, both my parents are doctors, but in the beginning, I'm not sure if you know, to become a doctor, you have to study for, 7-8 years, work extraordinarily hard as a GP, then as a, in the hospital and temping. It's a very, very brutal journey. Yeah. And so in the beginning, you have a lot of debt, but you don't have much money. And then over time, as you get, if you can become a specialist, then you can have the ability to earn money. And I think so later on in my teens, my parents started to earn a bit more money, and now they've done very well for themselves, but purely from hard work, right? My mom's probably done, I'd say, 35,000 cataracts. Eye surgeries. She's given 35,000 people back their sight. Yeah. Probably about 25,000 laser eye surgeries, help people see again. Just every single one has to be perfect. It's an incredible, and I believe in, hierarchies of competence, and the people who are great at what they do should be paid more. You want the best brain surgeon, and we should pay them like the most money that's possible to them. Yeah. And so, I think I was taught that hard work, but in the beginning I was very, had that real frugality mindset. So, and there was a lot of,
so would you, when you got money, would you just not spend it?
I would save it.
You'd save it. Do you know why you saved it? Have a think, and I'll share with you why, because I've gone through a process personally, to really uncover what my money mindset was, and why I think the way I do around money, and why I act the way I do around money. And I tracked it all the way back, because I'm a saver, right? Whenever I earn anything, I'd save it. So come from a very low socioeconomic background. So, I grew up in a caravan park here in Sydney, and then I moved to New Zealand, and we went into the housing commission area. And, it was a pretty, when I put it this way, when I say to people where I'm from and they know it, they're like, whoa. So pretty, but humble beginnings, let's call it, right? So I learned the value of, if I want anything in life, I've got to go out and earn it. I've got to work for it, and I've got to put in the hard yards, right? So, I'd do that. So when I was like 10 years old, I'd be door knocking, walking down the street, asking, knock, knock, have you got any jobs for me? You got any jobs? You got any jobs? And my vision at the time of money was, because I wanted to generate as many $2 coins as I could, right? $1 because I wanted to buy $1 worth of jet plane lollies, and the other $1 was because I wanted 5 20-cent pieces so I could clock Street Fighter, the arcade game, because I knew I could get through it with $1, right? And so I'd be earning money, and there was one day my stepdad, he asked if I wanted to come along to the dump so we can get rid of some rubbish from around the house. I said, yeah, cool. And he's like, oh, do you have any money on you? Because he knew I had some like cash, because I'd get like $5 here, $5 there. And I ended up, the day before, I transacted 4 $5 notes to him so I could get a 20, right? My first ever $20 note I'd ever earned. I was like, this is amazing, right? And he goes, oh, have you got that 20? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, cool. Well, I'll use that to pay for the dump, and I'll give it back to you. I'm like, yep, perfect. So I grabbed it, and anyway, we head off to the dump. We're in the van, in the ute, and we pull up and start throwing rubbish off and get, emptying the ute. And he's like, oh, yeah, where's that 20? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll grab it. And I went into my pocket to grab it, and I was like, fucking $20 is missing. Like, where's the $20? I was like, I can feel it right now when I share the story, because you go back to that moment. My heart sank, because what happened was, when I was asked to give that $20 to him, I felt this is my first time as a young boy that I can contribute to this family, right? So I grabbed that $20 out of the cupboard, and out of my drawer, and I never let go of it. And I got to the dump, and as I threw rubbish, I opened my hand, and the $20 flew out with it, right? And I was devastated. Like, I've lost tens of thousands of dollars in my career, right, on stupid decisions and things. Nothing hurts like that $20 does, right, to this day, right? I felt like I was throwing away my life almost. I was like, what? And so I've held on to a belief that when you get money, you've got to hold on to it and save it. Don't throw it away. So that was a program that had programmed me from that very young age all the way through to as I got my first ever job. I had to have a certain amount of money in my bank account because I was like, I've got to hold on to it. I've got to hold on to it. I can't spend it. If I ever got to that limit, I'd be like, nah, I'm not doing it. I'm not spending money. I wouldn't go out with friends if I had to go below a certain amount. And I was like, I never really understood that, right? Because you're not taught money as you grow up. It's not until you actually start generating money and you got responsibilities and so forth, you're like, oh, wait on, there's something around this. And so that is what really drove my, when you get it, you hold on to it. You know? And I mean, I've had friends who are, as soon as they get it, they have to get rid of it because money's bad to them. They have to just spend it. Right. So as soon as they get it, it's like payday happens, money's out, it's spent because it's easy come, easy go. It's that sort of mentality. And people have a paradigm around money. So a money mindset that we attach to it. And we can generally, if we go through the work and go through the process properly, you'll be able to uncover where does it stem from. For me, it just happened to be 10 years old and I was at the dump throwing away $20.
It's so interesting. I don't know. Everything always seems to come back. I don't know. There's this feeling my dad gave me, I think it was like 200, I don't know, $200 or $500, $700, can't remember, of stocks when I was a kid.
Right.
And I remember I would always read about go in the newspaper and look at the little price and check it out. And I was constantly fascinated by what was happening, where it was going.
Yeah.
And I've kept that my whole life. I've always invested in stocks. I just think it's a thing. I remember my grandfather was, he was a CFO, and I think he was fascinated by stocks as well. And my dad always talked about stocks, and, my parents always talked about money. I don't know. There's another part that's something about they would fight a lot about money because money was quite tight. And so it would cause a lot of, tension in the house.
Yeah.
I remember the feeling of that. I was like, why are they fighting? Like it's, just always about, money was a very, it was a tough time. It was the 80s, it was 20% interest. Think about that. And I'm not sure why. I think that feeling.
How do you handle money now? So, you've got, according to your bio, you got a personal wealth of $193 million, right? That's nothing to sneeze at. Now, I'm sure a lot of that's probably wrapped up in the company, right? And you don't have $193 million cash sitting in the bank. We wouldn't be talking if that was the case. We'd be doing this podcast in Monaco on a nice super yacht, I would hope. But how do you look at money now, though? Like, is it an investment tool for you? Is it fun tickets? Is it, how do you look at money?
I think there's a few things. One is it gives me freedom.
Yep.
To do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, and I'm coming to terms with that. I think really, I'm not quite there yet.
And what's that look like to you? Because it's nice to say, I like to be able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, however I want. But it's like, what does that actually, how does that portray? How does that?
When you go to a restaurant and you just order and you don't look at the prices.
Yes.
It starts from there.
Yeah.
It's, it's that feeling of when.
Was that one of the big shifts for you?
I still look at the prices, but I still check the bills.
My wife's like, stop looking at the prices, because I'm such a value oriented based person. Yep. And I'm like, why would I buy that for $80 when I can? The girl should have told me that I could have got this for $60 and I would have got an extra thing here or there. I'm like, why am I even thinking? What am I doing? Yeah. Right? We're programmed.
That mental capital, I'd love to invest instead in, conversation and focus in my girls and be more present.
Mm.
You know, I just see myself. I just go into these voids, or I'm so fixated on, one thing will just trigger this, and then I'm off thinking about all these other money related things, and there's this moment in time, Brett. I should just be there and just going. It could, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. I've had some miraculous conversation with them. It just could be like, we shared that word is really funny on the menu, or they're going to try something new this time, or what is this thing that they don't understand on the menu. It doesn't actually have to be always miraculous. I bring myself constantly back to the present and go, okay, put that in a box, let it go, come back to the present. And I think that signal to me says, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And so I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress.
I look at money, and I think I've identified, and I mean, there's a number of things, but I identified it really down to two things that I like to spend money on. Right. So I'm sitting here, I've got a $10 white t-shirt. Okay. Not a concern to me. I've got $30 pair of blue, sort of tight jeans on, and I've got a $100 pair of shoes. So I clearly, for me, value in clothing is not a huge thing. Very rarely are you ever going to really see me in a big Louis Vuitton jacket and Yeezys. I think they're ugly. I don't just buy them because it's got the brand or anything to it. But, I've got a nice car. I live in a really nice house in a really nice place, because there's reasons why, and I want to talk to you about that. But put it down to really two pillars. I like to spend money on experiences, right? Experiences and skipping the queue. That is what I've identified. So, for example, I hate lining up, right? I hate lining up. And I uncovered why, because again, I'm like, why am I so impatient?
Yeah.
I'm like, why the fuck am I so impatient all the time with lots of things? But I identified where I'm impatient. I'm impatient when I'm being slowed down in momentum. Okay. So when I'm standing in a line stationary, I am very impatient. If I'm stuck in traffic in a car and I'm like stuck, not moving, I am impatient. But if I'm moving and I'm in momentum, I'm not impatient. For example, and I was talking to my wife about this actually in the weekend. I said, it's quite interesting, and I've uncovered why. It's because I'm a momentum-based being. I need to keep moving. Right? I'd happily drive 20 Ks down the road and turn back around without stopping than have to wait an hour to go across the bridge here 200 meters. Right? That's just how and I've identified that within myself, right? So I'm a momentum-based being. But my point there around I spend it on experiences and skipping the queue. And on the front, it sounds, that makes sense. But when I break it all down, I'm like, that's the reason why I skip the queue. When I skip the queue, I'd go to any theme park and I'll invest, right? It's an investment to me to pay $100 extra to get a skip the queue pass. Because when I get to do that ride 5 times and you get to do it once, and I don't have to have the feeling of, I'm fucking lining up because I know it slows me down as a human, that's a win for me, right? I will spend money and invest money to go to try and fly business or first class wherever I can, not so I can sit in these amazing seats, although that is a big part of it. And I also have this paradigm, this belief that why am I not pushing myself to have the best of what is available if I decide to have the best of what is available, right? Case in point, I could have a $1,000 white t-shirt, but I don't want to because that's not where I want to put the investment, right? But I want to skip the queue. And the other component, experiences, right? I had this realization when a friend of mine, he bought the Mercedes full drive. This is about 9 years ago when it sort of first came out. He's 130 grand or something. I was like, fuck, how could you spend that much money? That is crazy, right? I can't believe you did that. And then I bought the, at the time it was like the new SRT8, so the Jeep, the V8 came out, and I sat in the car. Like as soon as I sat in, I was like, I understand why. I understand why people invest into nicer things like that. Because when I sit in my car now and I seen you're at the Taycan unveiling the other day. It's not in the Gold Coast here till next week or something. I was a little bit jealous. But there's something immensely invaluable about sitting in a vehicle or, and again, some people don't give a shit about cars, but for me, it makes sense because I'm a momentum-based being, and that's what vehicles do. They help you move forward in life and as a human. It just made me feel, and it up-levels me. It takes me to another level as a person, right?
Yeah.
I think what you said around the whole sitting down at dinner, and being able to not worry about whether the dinner costs you $200 or $500 and then going, shit, if I do that every night, that's going to be $4,000. And, this is like, it allows you to do this. And this is, I think, the magic of it all. And this is what I think hope money can bring for people is the ability to be present. The ability to be present in the moment and thinking about what's actually important and not that, oh shit, there's 8 of us here at dinner and we all have to split the bill soon. And this is going to, like, for me, it's just easy to go, look, I'll sort it out or I'll pay for it. And it's because that's an experience for me, right? Being able to do that sort of stuff where I know a lot of people, they, again, based off their own money paradigm, whether they've got money or not money, that's the crazy thing about it. Some people I know got more money than you can sink a ship with, but they've got that mindset of like, well, I had this thing and I had that thing, and but it's all driven from somewhere, right? So there's a bit of a preamble around, where I like to spend money, and I believe it helps me even produce more money and help other people produce more money because I'm living in those sort of areas. Make sense?
I loved it. I love it. I agree. I aligned to your experiences. One, I didn't think about the skipping the queue one. That's a really good way of framing that. I think there's something now for me about family. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I haven't quite put the words to it, but I felt as you were speaking about that, I was like, I remember I was in, and like, maybe just to give context as well for everyone, says I think it's important. Like, I love, a $10 handmade noodles down the road dinner, and I'll eat that. Like I'd eat tuna on toast, and some nights I just eat a bowl of lettuce. Like I just don't, it's about the experience. So I just, when we're talking about these things, and I'm sure you're the same, Brett, it's not, you're doing it for any other reason than, you've worked really hard to get some money together that you can go and share with some people and you enjoy, and that brings you happiness, and that gives you, I guess, the feeling of a reward. That was the reward you got for all that sacrifice.
Yep. It's all selfish. Like at the end of the day, it's all selfish related, right? It, again, depends on what people's perception of the word selfish is. But I love being able to, that one of the favorite things I like to do with money is when my mother comes over to visit, is she likes her lobster mornay, and like she's pretty easy to please. She gets the same thing all the time, but being able to go there and and know that she's going to get this, $200 lobster that she would never ever buy herself, like that to me is worth all the hard effort and work that I do, so I can have that feeling. But again, it's selfish because it's how I'm feeling, right? It's not, well, it's how it makes her feel. It's like, cool, well, it does make her feel good. But if we're being truly honest with ourselves, everything you do is selfish, because how she feels, it's directly correlated to how it makes me feel by seeing her feel like that. Right. So we are all selfish beings, and we all do come from our own perspectives, right? It's just how we connect and relate to that. And there's nothing more rewarding. I think if you look at entrepreneurship, right, the highest level of, let's call it entrepreneurship, is contribution. Right. So, depending on what your belief is around money and how much money you think you need to have. And I've caught myself out sometimes. I've been like, oh, I'd like to give to this charity. Like, I can't wait until I can just write a, $100,000 check to this charity and just be absolutely great with it. I'm like, well, mate, why don't you start with $1,000 check? right? Instead of, oh no, you better wait until you got the 100,000. So again, it's that whole paradigm around, I have to have a certain amount of something before I can do X. Right, which is a huge limiter for every human being. It's like, I got to lose 10 kilos before I can sign up to you as a personal trainer. It's like, that's what personal trainers do. They help you lose it. It's like someone going, so with us here at Klaxon, right? So we help grow and scale businesses using social search, programmatic, everything, advertising, right? Return on investment based. And they're like, I'll go and do this first before No, that's what we do. We help grow. We'll help you solve that. So people feel they need X before they need Y, right? What they really need is Y before X. They need Y as in WHY, right? Really, truly understand that. So I don't even know what I was talking about there. I'm definitely going off on a tangent.
Well, no, I agree with you. I think the biggest inhibitor normally just for someone to buy or do something, there is a rational part to it. And once they've decided they possibly are interested in that, the actual biggest inhibitor that normally stands in the way is, I don't think that'll work for me. Oh, it's great. That person did it. That person did it. And they did it for that person. I can see the rationality. Yes, we're going to need that, but I'm different and it's probably not going to work. And then they go and deal with that disappointment and they take that on board, and then they avoid it. And then obviously that's when that's normally, it's a cycle, right? And you try and break out of that. Some people just, can just jump over that and go, look, I don't care. I'm prepared to do this. And then when they do, they feel amazing because they had so much fear and doubt and anxiety about it not working for them, that then now they've overcome that. So I think there's I can imagine in your business, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are, we go back to that definition, they're taking risks, with you, and you're like, we've done this 1,000 times. We know it's going to work for you. They're like, oh, but I'm different and it's not going to work for me. And, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of the results that you're going to deliver. And that emotional, dialogue is inhibiting them from taking that step. So I think that probably applies, like you said, losing 10 kilos. Let's, lose half a kilo, or, you want to run a marathon, run down to your, local shops and back. Awesome.
It's got to start somewhere, right? And for me, it's funny that you bring that up, that whole, I want to do this, but, right? And everyone can have this beautiful vision of what life would be like. But sometimes, when faced with you got to make the decision, things change critically. And I'm in the process actually, and I've started scrapbooking down some ideas, because I've been on this narrative the last few months, and it's starting to really amplify. So I go through cycles where there's just a narrative that, is brewing in my head, and it's based off all the conversations over the past few months and so forth. And it's just been amplified with COVID and the situation, and seeing so many businesses go out of business when, one, they shouldn't have, when two, they really should have gone out of business earlier and they held on too long, right? And three, so there's such a big mix, right? That third being, they actually just wake up to the reality of where they're currently at. And I feel that there's such a, right now, what I'm really trying to uncover and unpack is this bridge from when a business owner who understands or is awakened to the fact that they're actually running a business and they're not running it the way in which they should be if they were the actual business owner, right? So unpack that a little bit. Meaning, they're in a situation right now, they've gotten themselves to a certain situation by whether it's sheer hard work or great opportunity, right place, right time. But the reason why they're saying, oh, but I need to do this first, or I need to think about this first, is because they're not acting in accordance as a business owner, right? Like you right now, and it's easier for a business that's successful already and has a track record. Well, let me phrase that, easier. as a business that is successful or has a track record of this. And that's that thing of actually starting to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. And I feel they're two different things, right? There's two different connections to it. Because entrepreneur is, I am an entrepreneur. I have a master's in entrepreneurship, right? And I've got a sub category in business, right? That's how how I'd see it, right? So I'm an entrepreneur first. That visionary, the forward looking, the bigger picture component. Then business owner second, where there's some people who aren't even entrepreneurial right now. They're a trapped business person, right? Who's trapped themselves. They've got themselves in a headlock, and they're struggling to make the decisions that a business owner should make, right? Which is inhibiting the growth of their business. Someone like yourself, and we started talking about this the other day, which could be a good loop to come back to, is, I'm not the CEO of our company, right? So from that day-to-day operational component, I'm not that person. I'm not the person, making all the operational decisions day to day. Now, I'm obviously highly involved in, building the business and making, big decisions, etc. But I'm not in that sort of day to day. And I know you still have CEO in your bio, but I'm not sure because we didn't get to finish that conversation the other day where you said that you realized a few years ago you weren't the CEO of the business. So talk to me about that, because I want to sort of because and this feeds back into my story of, once you identify your business owner first, or entrepreneur first, or technician first, you're able to grow exponentially, which I'm sure you would have uncovered, right?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think you've nailed it there, Brett. I use slightly different words, but they're the same meaning. So when you talk about I'm an entrepreneur, I talk about that as being like a shareholder.
Yep.
And you contributed either, personal time as equity, sweat equity, or actual money. And so you own shares in the company, and you need to sometimes think like a shareholder and think about investments. And then the second one, as a business owner, I think that's the CEO conversation. Are you the CEO of the company? Are you making the calls, like you said, that the company should be making, as opposed to the ones that you personally feel comfortable with as an individual?
Yeah.
And that's probably where, I just want to just clarify something. My title is the co-CEO. So, and this might
explain to me how that works.
Yeah. So Frank and I have always been co-CEOs of Finder the whole time. I think it's a bit like how Mike and Scott Farquhar are co-CEOs, but eventually Mike is not the CEO anymore, and Scott Farquhar in Atlassian, he's the CEO. I think it might have, and they were the co-CEO for a long time, and I think it might have been the same in the start of Google as well, with Sergey and Larry.
Yep.
And
how much of that do you and I know you'll be honest with me, but how much of that is wrapped up in the ego of both being equal because you're both partners, or do you think it's a new thing that's sort of, and when I say new, I mean, you're right, Google came out with it. There's a few big companies who have this as a thing, but I'm not, like, the more I sort of deep dive into it, and again, it comes back to what does that actually co-CEO mean? Because you can go, I mean, you could have three co-CEOs, but one person just does the job of it, and the others have sort of got the same, let's call it title. But what's your, why did you both decide to do co-CEO?
So I think in the beginning, and probably the tough time for me was when, Frank there was only Finder Australia as a business, and he became really that CEO. And I actually left the leadership meetings. Yeah, that's a pretty big.
You did?
I just stopped turning up, because
Why?
I didn't really have it was like day-to-day operations, and very important decisions, and none of those decisions did I have any actual responsibility for.
Yeah.
I was not accountable. I was accountable to the whole enterprise, but they're not none of those were my decisions nor my team's. And so I realized I was just basically, I was the ghost in Scooby-Doo that was hanging around the haunted house, trying to preserve it to the way it used to be.
Yeah.
And so I just stopped going, and nothing, and that was fine. I just said to Frank, I don't know if I should go to that meeting anymore, because I think I'm causing more. And in the most polite way, Frank helped me sort of exit, and he does that in a very, very polite way. So I do think there's an ego conversation in that. On the other side, but what actually happened then was I went to the US and I was the CEO in the US.
Yeah, that's right.
And started up Finder there, right? So and I just want to really nail this part, Brett, because I think there's an important distinction to make. Is that I bet there was a moment in time when you were the CEO and there was no one else. And in that start, there are very few people, unlike that could have actually put together all of the components and led the company to where it is today and have that vision about where you're going, because what's in front of you is pretty much, everyone's staring at what we're doing right now going, where are we going to go? And you're like, well, it's obvious we're going to go over there. And no one else can see that and put those components together. So, and I think this is where, I've got this new title, I guess, sort of forming in the company, which is, called the Chief Creative Officer. Now, if you Google that again and look at the definition of a Chief Creative Officer, it's very fascinating, is that in the beginning, when a company is forming, there's a blur between the Chief Creative Officer and a CEO. And some people call them, potentially they are the CEO, and then it transitions. So another example, I think Hugh Hefner in Playboy is the Chief Creative Officer. He wasn't the CEO of Playboy, which was a very successful, casino, hotel, merchandise, clothing, perfume company, and still is today. But, he was that Chief Creative Officer and, would create these experiences and really get involved with the brand and the vision, and I think potentially where that tends to transition is, if you're talking traditional companies, is where you see a lot of CEOs go from being the CEO to being the chairman, and potentially an executive chairman, where you're involved in the company. You don't have the final say day to day, but the CEO ultimately reports to you, in the board. And, you may work on certain things like chairmen and directors, I feel, get very involved in companies, and they really start to help and drive that. I think that's potentially the place where I can naturally transition to. And then on the other side, in new projects, so like the Finder app as an example, I think again, or even HiveX with the cryptocurrency brokerage we sort of built, right, out of nothing. And, none of us had a financial services background, but we invented this new business, which is, traded $150 million of cryptocurrency for our clients, which is great, but I felt like, I'm sure you would have as well, Brett, when you're going into this, absolute conviction, complete confidence in where you're going, clear vision of where we're going to. And, I think that birthing and that commencing is, naturally always going to be that, is it the word CEO? It has to evolve now because there's a bigger company. Maybe it's just the leader, we at the time, and eventually, that changes.
I just think there's so much meaning externally being attached to, and this goes back to words, right? There's been meaning and attachment to three letters, and I realize, and a friend of mine, he's actually just stepped out of being CEO for his company. So shout out to Jack. He runs the Entourage. So I think you might be connected with him. So Jack,
I know Jack.
So Jack DeLosa. So we're connecting, and we've been mates for a few years and had conversations around Klaxon. Relatively, we're just over 3 years old, so relatively new company, but old in this industry, because again, it's it feels like we've been in it for 20 years. But something that he said, and I was saying to him quite often, I'm like, why are you still in the CEO day-to-day running of it? Because I know what he truly enjoys and where his best work is delivered from and how to deliver it. And it was always in the plan of their, their business to sort of, for him to be able to step out and, bring in, not bring in, but provide advancement in a role for now their CEO, Tim. And we had this conversation around that, and I said, I personally feel that, because I'll be totally honest as well. I had a connection at the very start going, if I hand over the CEO title, or if I don't have it as well, that depositions me in a business. And that was just my ego fucking just getting carried away with myself, right? Because the reality is it actually doesn't. And I mean, the argument, no matter, you could look at it any which way. If you need to try and prove to yourself that, keep your ego strong, you can easily reframe it and go, well, it could be seen as even a better thing, right? By not having to have that sort of attachment to that role. However, the reality of it came, and the reason why I want to talk about this, because I know there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast and follow me and have been following me for many years who are sort of that CEO role in their business, but I know that they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. And this is probably based on, I'm going off on a bit of a side note here, side bubble, that there's really no clarification around, CEO's almost gotten blurred in this day and age, where, because there's a lot more businesses that are co-founded and there's multiple founders within it who could all probably run the race and hold the baton. But there's so much confusion around that. But for me, it was to be able to go, you know what, I do my best work when I'm not governed, because if I'm not moving forward, if I'm not in momentum, day-to-day, I don't like lining up, right? Like I said. So day-to-day operational tasks that need to be ticked off the list, like that is not where I do my best work. Now I can do it and I have done it and I'm, more than capable of being able to do it, but that's not the point. It's like, where do you best operate? And me operating in the area where I do now actually provides more value for the business moving forward than it would if I was in a role that, I was the choke point, right? Necessarily. So it's an interesting one, a realization for many, co-founders, founders, CEOs, even to the point where there's business owners right now who they are the CEO in their role, but they need to get out of the bloody way and blossom into being the entrepreneur, right? The more visionary side of things, and hire someone in who is really good at running the day-to-day and the business itself. But there's so much reward, gratification almost attached to this. I'm the founder, CEO of a company. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting, and from your perspective, where are you at right now with all of that? So what's your sort of day-to-day within reason sort of look like? Is it you're still heading up the Finder app, the new app, so you've sort of built a side project, or you work on other ventures as well? Where do you sort of fit into the pie?
Yeah, I think I do get involved with the strategy of Finder, and right now we're doing our 12-month strategy and plan, and all the countries are presenting their strategies, and I talk to the CEOs a lot of the different countries. And I talked to Frank a lot, obviously, and to the COO. He's also a co-founder with Jeremy. And I talked to our head of tech. But day-to-day, what am I doing? Yeah, I'm building the next ventures of Finder. I'm enterprising. If that's, I think, and
do you do that with a team, or is that you ideating, thinking it out? You're not doing any of the coding, are you? Or you sort of jump back on and have no? So you in a small team, or what does that sort of look like?
Yeah, we've got a really small team. It's called Finder Ventures, so it sits on the side, and it has the infrastructure of Finder, but it incubates the new businesses. So our cryptocurrency brokerage, HiveX, that was incubated started in February 2018. It was incubated inside Finder Ventures, and the app sort of kind of transitioned now into the mothership. It's like become pretty core.
Right.
So it's kind of that's a challenge, moving that in and moving a business inside another bigger business.
Why'd you do it like that and not separate the business and have a total different company? Is it just to increase the value of Finder as a whole, or?
I think that the two are very tied together.
Okay.
They're just there's two interlinked. It's very hard to separate them. I think the app in and of itself is more of a platform anyway. So there's probably other businesses as we go along we'll keep incubating and putting into it with the same brand of Finder, but it's not. It's just they're just different businesses.
Yeah, right.
So I think of the web as a platform, and I think of app and maybe taking a step back is someone's phone a platform, because the web, the mobile web, and a website I think is a channel, and then I think an app is a channel, and both of them sit on the phone. So the phone itself, you take your phone with you and you use the internet and all those things and what you expect to do from that. But then you take your desktop out, or you take your laptop out, or your iPad out, and you have different things. I use, currently I'm using an iPad and a desktop and my phone at the same time, which sounds,
Right.
I kind of I used to dual wield, desktop and phone, and now I kind of tri wield, because I think the iPad, I'm sort of, now I was kind of like, I don't know if this is interesting or not, Brett, but talking about how I use technology, I think it's fascinating. How do you interface with your company?
Oh, absolutely. I've gone the complete opposite way. After COVID, I was like, I'm no longer using a desktop. If I need a desktop to do anything, then I'm not building a business properly. So I had and it was a bit of an internal goal. I was like, oh, I can't wait to get to the point. I want to be able to run a business and have a business that is run via my mobile phone. That's the utopia. I'm not there yet. So I've got a little laptop that I use. I used to have a 27-inch Mac. I loved it. It was big. It was aesthetically pleasing to me, but it's actually internally rewarding for me to be able to not have to do that. Because here's what would happen, right? Because I know how to do a number of things, right? Because I'm curious and I love to learn, I like to try new things. All of a sudden, I'd be finding myself in the back end of a website. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm taking on a task here that, one, I shouldn't do. I need to stay away from, and I'm not the best person to do it. But because I had this big laptop, a big desktop, it just made it a lot more accessible to be able to do that. Where now on a laptop, I'm like, I probably can't do too much, right? But it also fits in with me, right? When I had a desktop, 27-inch desktop, you can't move it, right? I'm a momentum-based being. I like to keep in flow. I like to be moving. So I got a laptop, I could pick it up and move anywhere I want. Right? So again, it's just how am I fine-tuning my own performance as a human being to be able to operate in the area that, is going to get the most out of me, which I think is absolutely important. And, to your point, you use 3 different devices. That clearly seems to create momentum for you, right, to get more done.
It's interesting. Like you say that I did this went on a journey the same way. I said everything on the mobile, and I went pure mobile. Right. And then I went back to desktop and mobile. And when I take my desktop out, I want to get into more the detail, because that's when I went back into creation mode. So there's kind of like that loop back where, you want to have that ability, like you said, to get in the back end and do things. And the reason why I've looked at the iPad recently is I'm a very visual person. And so I want to draw things, and drawing and communicating is hard right now because we're not in person. And so I feel like it's important. And it's actually, I share this story, and it's probably the same story that, other people are experiencing in different avenues of their life. But I, went to use this iPad and do things, and I was like, oh, it's so hard. How do I do this? It's so hard. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to learn something.
Yes.
And it's so important to, your interface with business and how you do things, and to relearn. I was like, oh, it's right in my face. And I'm like, oh, this is how it feels to grow again. I'm growing. I love it. This is fun. And once I took that step back, I didn't feel frustrated. I was just like, oh, this is just, cool. This is awesome. I'm on this journey, and I enjoy the experience of the challenge and the mistakes and I don't know. I wanted to share that. And, switching up your desktop to a different machine can be a great experience. And you just throw a lot of things up in the air and, it's an interesting challenge. I think it's the same thing of, if the way in which you go to work, or the commute or route that you take, change it up, go somewhere different. Small one I tend to do is I reorganize the home screen of my phone.
Yes. Move apps around. Yeah. I do that all the time. Because you get you could sit there right now and you'll be able to move straight to whatever app, and you're like, oh my God, I'm already 8 scrolls deep on Instagram and I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing. Apps, I love that one. Yeah, move the apps around, even to the point where sometimes I will encourage people to delete them for a day and see how many times you have moments of anxiety. Because where is it? Oh, that's right, I deleted it. It's only for a day. I'll be all right. Oh, it's and you're back to it. Yeah, so challenging the way and changing the way we do things, I think, is absolutely important. Do you do that? Because I'm always looking to try and hack my life, right? I'm always looking for improvements, or skipping the queue, let's call it, right? Because I believe there's always a faster way to do something, right? And we've only got one chance at life, and we've got a certain amount of time, got a timeline, and all those efficiencies, over time, leads to a massive more amount of output and things that you can experience and do. So that's sort of what drives me. What do you do to hack your life, or how do you? Because I'm on this sort of narrative that life is a game, all right, and life has a certain set of rules, and we all have our own set of rules. And I look at the end of the day and go, how did I play the game of life today? Right? How did I turn up? How did I play? What did I do? What can I do differently? And that's purely based off my own, values as a human being. What is it that you truly value? What drives you? Just for our listeners, that's just Fred in a moment of thought there. It's a deep question. I knew I just fucking threw it right at you. You knew it was coming at some stage.
That's a really good one. And, I don't have the reason why I'm thinking about it is I'm trying to get to the real underpinning.
Let me try and
rephrase your question.
It might help. So you how many children did you say you had?
I have two. And one more coming.
Oh, awesome. And what ages?
They're 10 and 7.
10 and 7. Okay, cool. So when your 10-year-old comes to you and says, Dad, what advice do you have for me to live my life? What's a good way to live as a human being? Right. That's going to be your values transferred down, right? So what advice would you say? That could be a good place to start.
Do the things that you naturally love to do, and try and find ways and frameworks and people who are making money from that, and that can help and share you, and build a passive stream of income that will enable you to go and do the things you truly love to do and be free to do them, and do that with lots of people that you love, and just listen to yourself continuously. And when you hear yourself being unhappy or frustrated by something, make a change, and that change will always serve you. And go back to that question and that thing that you love and that drives you, and keep looking in there. And the ultimate mix of doing something you love to do and making money from it, and that's where it starts and ends. And I think when you've got those things, and when those things start coming in, now go and explore what else that you love to do, and share that with the people you love. And naturally you'll have to make some decisions about what you love to do and what you don't love to do. And the hardest question normally is not saying yes, but it's actually saying no, working out what you're not prepared to do, and you're not prepared to compromise on, and what you're not prepared to negotiate on, and stay firm on that, and just continue to be your incredible, different and creative self.
Mate, love it. Love it. I'm also just very aware of the time here. I think we could speak for days. So we need to do a session over a couple of bottles of wine. I think that's probably going to be the next one for us. Mate, let's wrap this bad boy up. What do you, and I mean, the advice that you just gave your 10-year-old there is very relevant for everyone, but what advice do you have right now for business owners who are out there, entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs who are maybe sitting there going, what the heck's happening with this world? Where's the economy going? How am I even supposed to be thinking right now? Right? What advice do you have for those people?
So the first thing is that everyone else is with you. They're experiencing the same, even myself, I'm looking at, how do we grow? How do we grow from here? We've obviously taken some hits in some places, other places have grown, but how do we grow from here? So that's okay. It's okay to feel like that and accept that. And let's take those feelings and all those other emotions that you're wrapping with it and just put them in a box and set them to the side. That's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is, I have this visual in my mind of 3 circles. There's sort of a big circle in the middle, and that's the present. There's a medium-sized circle behind it, that's the past. And the circle in front's very small, but it's growing, and that's the future. And they're kind of overlapping in some ways, and they're transitioning. But the past is the past, it's done. And you can think about that a lot, and you'll get angry, and you just leave that. That's finished now. And the future, it's so unclear, and it's moving, and it's this ethereal object, and it's, it looks small, but actually you want it to be big, and you're not clear, you're not exactly sure. The more you think about that, the more anxious you'll get. Just let it go. It's fine. The future is coming. I guarantee you on that. But instead, I think the most powerful and, I guess, empowering feeling for yourself is just look at today, right now. What is in front of you? What are the opportunities? Even if they're small, 5-cent pieces, you go and pick them up right now. $10 note here, $20 note, Brett, like you said before. What are
if
those? If
anyone can find that $20 note, I'll give you $20,000. I want that actual $20 note that I had.
If you can just focus on those opportunities now, and just those, and see where they go, and be your natural, what we talk about, risk-taking self in order to make a profit for the future. I assure you that you will find the future opportunities that you're trying to aim and seek for. And they come from that thread of today, right now. That $5 note on the floor, and there's nothing else around it, but just you go and seek out a number of opportunities. One of those will hit, come to you and feel really strong and powerful, and just go with it. And I think one of the underlying feelings, I think, that helps with that is, where you would normally have said no, maybe say yes and go with it.
Figure out the rest later. Mate, I relate heavily with the concept of right now. Actually, my first book that I wrote is called Right Now. Why not you and why not now? So, mate, that's uncanny. But I absolutely believe that people need to start doing something now. See what's there right now, and to your point, start saying yes more. You'll be surprised.
Pick up a copy of your book as well. Probably that's the way to go.
There you go. That'd probably be the best start. But mate, appreciate you spending your time here again today. Mate, this has been fun. I'm looking forward to round 3. There we go.
It's awesome, Brett.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.